Yeah, no, cool. Well, yeah, no. Actually, I mean, I think that's something that's coming across is that you guys are not looking at high performance culture in a traditional way. It's very forward thinking. So without giving too much away, because it's probably better if people want to speak to you that they pick up the phone and speak to you direct. Can you explain your company's methodology in sustaining high performance cultures and how that is different from what's gone before?
I talked before about sort of this recognition that culture was the difference, right, between success and failure. But that's only so useful to realize. And I think most people would go, yeah, that makes sense, right? But then what do you do about it? So there was then a second phase to what we've been developing and researching and refining over the last few years, which was, okay, so if that is true, how do you then develop that high performance culture? What are the elements of it? And at first that's difficult to distill because you could take a company with a great culture that you really admire and you would really like a similar culture. But if you try and copy all the things that they do, even if you've got a similar sized company doing the same sort of thing, you've got a different set of people. And so copying what they do won't work necessarily. So the second phase of what we went and did was we went and distilled all of those initiatives, practices, frameworks, all that kind of stuff into a set of principles. So we tried to take it up one level to what are the themes, what are the principles, what are the categories people focus on, companies focus on. And again, that took a long time, and the first version of that wasn't perfect, and we've refined that over the last few years to come to this version that we have now of what we call the culture operating system. So essentially there are 7 elements to high performance culture in the culture operating system. And if you think of it like a Parthenon, you have 2 foundational pieces. So the first is mission, purpose, and vision. So you need to have real clarity on where you're trying to go, why what you're doing matters, and also what the company will look like, what the story of the company will be if you achieve that mission. That last part's really important because often companies are quite clear on their mission. A lot of them are clear on their purpose, but in terms of vision, they go, I'll get to this much revenue or da-da-da-da-da. Those are factors. But if you can tell your story in advance, then people who work in your company, and also probably your customers and suppliers and things like that, they can align their personal story to that story. And so it'll really help with retention and engagement and those sorts of things. So getting really clear on what that future narrative is really important. So that's the first foundation. And if you think of kind of alongside that, the second block of the foundation is values and non-negotiables. Lots of elements to that, but essentially it's what kind of organization are you trying to build? There's lots of different ways to build a company. There's no one right way. There are probably some wrong ways, but you can achieve the same goals in various different ways, right? And some companies will be very high performance driven and not very tolerant and all that kind of stuff. Some will be very inclusive and supportive, and neither of those is right or wrong. It's just a different way to achieve a goal. So you've got to decide what kind of company you're building, create a set of values. Some people don't like the term values. It can be a set of principles, a credo. At Vasapi, we have a manifesto, which serves the same purpose. You can call it different things. But it's essentially, what are those fundamental principles, rules, laws that you're going to build your company around? And so the first thing is getting those 2 foundational pieces in place. Then on top of that, and a lot of companies miss that, by the way. So they try and do the tactical stuff without laying that foundation. And so what you end up with is a bunch of stuff, some of which might work, some of which probably doesn't, but it's not connected by anything foundational. So then on top of those foundations, you've got 4 pillars. So the first of your pillars is talent acquisition. So are you bringing the right people into your company? And this is heavily informed by the values and non-negotiables, because it's not just about the right skills, it's also about the right individuals that share values, share beliefs with you. Now, there's several elements to this in terms of how you create an engaging experience, how you attract candidates in the first place, how you assess them really robustly. There's diversity and inclusion elements to this, because the biggest mistake that people make with hiring is that they focus on culture fit. So culture fit creates It squashes diversity, it creates homogenous teams. So hiring for values fit is much better than culture fit. There's a whole element around deciding what you actually need and all this kind of stuff. But talent acquisition is really key because actually if you get the right people on the bus, everything else gets so much easier. It's a big part of culture, but you've got to be able to define that in the first place, which again is where the foundations come in place. Your second pillar is performance management and alignment. So is everyone super clear on what they're trying to achieve, what their own objectives are? Are those objectives aligned? Is there a golden thread running through from that mission and vision to company objectives, department objectives, individual objectives? What are we doing in the next 90 days, the next month, the next week? What are we doing today that leads towards that 10, 15, 20-year vision? All those things have to align. And then you've got to help people to achieve those goals. So it's kind of companies that we go into, especially early stage companies, they either have no performance management or performance management is inconsistent or it's used in a remedial way. It's like if someone's underperforming, then they have performance management. But you think about a Formula One team, they review what's happening after every race, right? Or you think about the Navy SEALs, they do an after-action review after every mission. So performance management needs to be a constant thing. And actually, top performers really like being reviewed and scored and given feedback and all that kind of stuff. So that's the second pillar. The third pillar is all about developing people. So that can be career progression, skills progression, getting new experiences, that kind of thing. And those two pillars really align well because your objectives and performance management should be stretching people. If you're going to stretch people, you've got to help them to achieve things that they haven't achieved before. So developing people is really key. It's a massive factor in retention. So LinkedIn did a survey a few years back where they surveyed people who'd left their jobs in the previous 12 months. And they asked them various questions, including what would have made you stay longer at your previous employer. And 94% of people said that they would have stayed longer if they felt the company had invested in their development, which is a huge number, right? 94%. So it tells you, first of all, that people care about it, but also the bar's really low. A lot of companies are not investing in their people, which actually is madness if you think about it, because if your people get better at what they do and increase their capability, then your company gets better and the capability of your organization as a whole increases. So it's crazy not to invest in people's development. But there you go. It often gets deprioritized because everything's busy, right? So then your final pillar on top of those foundations is, we call it employee experience and continuous cultural improvement, which is a bit of a mouthful. But you kind of think about it as like experience and environment. So people's experience of working for your company is the reality for them of working for your company. And the key sort of concept in here is about creating feedback loops. So what you've got to make sure you're doing is getting lots of feedback from your people in lots of different formats, and then taking action on the things that you can take action on. It doesn't mean doing everything they ask for, but you give feedback on the things you can't do, you explain things, and you listen to your employees. I don't think people really expect their employer to be perfect. I think they want to understand that they are listening and that they're trying to make things better. And if you can make things better for your employees, then you probably should. It's probably a good idea. There are going to be things you can't do, obviously. But, you know, within environment, there also comes things like the physical environment, there comes things like communication, diversity, equity, and inclusion, particularly these days, you know, remote and hybrid working, how you manage that. All those kind of factors fall into that pillar as well. So it's kind of like the space that your team operate in. And then finally, you have the roof of the Parthenon, right? So on top, you have inspiring leadership. And this is really, really key, because you can do all the other stuff right, but if your leaders aren't behaving in the right way, aren't motivating people, aren't role modeling, aren't communicating properly, the whole thing's going to fall down. So this is the methodology that we work on. Now, the key sort of consideration in this is, where does each company need to focus? Because there's lots of things underneath each of those elements of the operating system, but you can't do it all at once. And so you've got to decide, well, what are the 2 or 3 key priorities? Because if you try and do everything, it creates too much friction. So that's the first part, is figuring out where are you against those things and what are the highest priority things, and then you can take action. You asked me as well where it's different than things that exist already. And, I've looked for a long time for something like this, a sort of comprehensive methodology, if you like, for taking a company from wherever it is to wherever it needs to go. And I haven't been able to find anything. There's lots of research, there's lots of technology, there's lots of books that are interesting. There's some classics like 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, The Culture Code, the work that Daniel Coyle did. Really good books, but they don't provide a complete system. And I was really surprised when I was looking into this. So this is where it's different. It's a system that not only makes culture tangible, it makes it actionable as well. It makes it measurable. It makes it clear and gives people real confidence and guidance in what specifically to focus on, what specifically to do, and then what to do next, and what to do next, and what to do next, and what to do next. But one of the key caveats with that is we never tell a company what their culture should be. So all of the tools that exist within that operating system, they help companies define the culture that they want. And then once they've defined that, they help them to embed that culture and to continue to evolve it. But it's never going to go, you should build a culture like this. May recommend against certain things, but there's lots of freedom to be unique within that operating system.